Have you ever noticed that the aches and pains of getting older rarely announce themselves all at once? Instead, they arrive as a quiet, persistent presence, a slight stiffness in the knee when you stand up, a low hum in the lower back after a long walk. We tend to accept these sensations as the natural price of passing time. But what if we have been looking in the wrong place for the cause? What if the origin of these common complaints is not in our knees or our backs at all, but at the very foundation of the body, in a part of us we rarely think about until it complains? The human body is a masterwork of engineering, but for the past several generations, we have been systematically undermining one of its most critical structures. And the key to unlocking a future with less pain and more freedom might be closer than you think. You are listening to the Longevity Library, where we archive the wisdom of healthy aging. The architecture of a long life. Rebuilding your foundation for healthy years. There is a question that tends to surface with more frequency as the decades pass. It often arrives not as a loud, dramatic epiphany, but as a quiet, persistent thought in a quiet moment. Perhaps you are standing up from a low chair, and you notice a small hesitation, a slight stiffness in the knee that wasn't there a few years ago. Or perhaps you are on a walk, a simple walk you have taken hundreds of times, and you become aware of a subtle ache in your lower back, a familiar companion that has taken up residence. The question is this: is this simply what getting older feels like? Is this slow, incremental decline an unavoidable part of the contract? For a very long time, the answer from conventional wisdom has been a resigned yes. We have been taught to expect a gradual loss of function, a slow accumulation of minor pains, and a natural reduction in our physical capabilities. We are offered solutions that are largely palliative: a more comfortable chair, a stronger pain reliever, a supportive brace. These things manage the symptoms, but they do not address the underlying current. They treat the squeaking hinge, but they ignore the fact that the entire foundation of the house may be slowly shifting. What if we have been asking the wrong question? The question is not how to manage the aches of aging, but rather, what is their true origin? To answer that, we must look not at the knees or the back where the pain finally surfaces, but to the very bottom of the structure. We must look at the feet. For most of our lives, we have likely regarded our feet as reliable, if unremarkable, servants. They carry us from place to place. We encase them in whatever shoe is fashionable or functional, and we pay them little attention until they complain. But this perspective overlooks a profound biological truth. The human foot is not a simple platform. It is one of the most sophisticated pieces of natural engineering in the known world. Consider its architecture. Within this relatively small space are housed 28 bones, which is roughly 1/4 of all the bones in your entire body. These are not static blocks, but a complex, articulated structure designed for both stability and flexibility. Connecting these bones is a dense network of over 100 muscles, tendons, and ligaments, all working in a coordinated fashion. And finally, the foot is a sensory organ of astonishing capability, packed with thousands of nerve endings per square inch. Its purpose is not merely to support weight, but to gather a constant stream of information about the world beneath us, the texture of the ground, its angle, its stability, and to transmit that data to the brain with every single step. In this way, the foot is the body's primary interface with the earth. It is designed to be dynamic, to act as a natural shock absorber, handling roughly half of the impact forces generated when we walk or run. The arch is not a rigid bridge, but a living spring, flattening slightly to absorb energy and then rebounding to release it, propelling us forward. The toes, particularly the great toe, are not ornamental. They are essential levers and pivots, providing the final, powerful push that moves us along. This is a system of exquisite complexity and efficiency, honed over hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution. And yet, for the past several generations, we have systematically undermined this entire system. We have taken this marvel of natural engineering and immobilized it. The modern approach to footwear, born from a combination of fashion, status, and a well-intentioned but misguided attempt to provide support, has effectively placed the human foot in a long-term, low-grade cast. The result is not just weaker feet. The result is a cascade of compensation that travels up through the entire body, creating the very aches and pains we have come to accept as an inevitable part of aging. Understanding this cascade is the first step toward a different future, one where our later decades are defined not by decline and accommodation, but by continued capability and vitality. This is not a story of a quick fix or a miracle cure. It is a story of returning to first principles, of understanding the architecture of our own bodies, and of making choices that allow our natural design to function as intended. It is a journey that begins at the ground, and from there, rebuilds the entire structure of a long and healthy life. Part 1. The cascade of compensation. To understand how a problem in the feet can manifest as pain in the knees, hips, or back, it is helpful to visualize the body as a kinetic chain. This is a linked system where each joint and segment influences the ones above and below it. When one link in the chain is not functioning correctly, the other links must adjust and compensate to maintain balance and allow for movement. This is precisely what happens when the foot is immobilized by modern footwear. The typical shoe, whether a dress shoe with a slight heel or an athletic shoe with a thick, cushioned sole, disables the foot's natural capabilities in three primary ways. First, it constricts the toes. The toe box of a standard shoe is tapered, pushing the toes inward toward the center of the foot. This is particularly damaging for the great toe, which is the body's main anchor and pivot. By squeezing the toes together, the shoe prevents the great toe from lying flat and engaging with the ground. It is lifted and immobilized, unable to perform its role in propulsion. This is akin to trying to walk with your thumb tied to your hand. Second, it dulls the senses. The thick, padded sole, often made of soft foam, acts as a barrier between the thousands of nerve endings on the sole of the foot and the ground. This cushioning, which is marketed as a source of comfort, actually robs the brain of the detailed sensory information it needs to make precise adjustments. It's the difference between driving a car and feeling the road through the steering wheel, and driving a car with thick mittens on your hands. You can still steer, but you lose the subtle feedback that allows for fine-tuned control. Third, it immobilizes the structure. The rigid arch supports and stiff soles prevent the foot from moving dynamically. The arch, instead of being allowed to flex and recoil like a spring, is held in a fixed position. The muscles and tendons that are designed to control this dynamic movement are never called upon to do their job. They are kept in a state of enforced idleness. Now, consider the effect of this triple immobilization on the rest of the body. When the foot cannot absorb its share of the shock, that force must go somewhere. It travels up the kinetic chain, placing greater stress on the ankles, the knees, the hips, and the lumbar spine. When the foot cannot make precise, micro-adjustments to uneven terrain, the structures above must work harder to maintain balance, leading to muscular tension and joint strain. When the great toe cannot provide a stable pivot, the body must alter its gait, creating unnatural movement patterns that can, over time, wear down the joints of the knees and hips. The chronic pain that so many people experience is not a random occurrence. It is not simply bad luck or an inevitable consequence of getting older. It is often the predictable outcome of a lifetime of moving in ways that are fundamentally unnatural. a direct result of the cascade of compensation that begins the moment we put on a pair of shoes that disable the natural function of our feet. Part 2. The foot-brain connection and the silent decline of proprioception. There is another layer to this story, one that moves beyond the purely mechanical and into the realm of neurology. It concerns a sense you may not even know you have, called proprioception. Proprioception is the body's ability to sense its own position, movement, and action in space. It is the reason you can touch your finger to your nose with your eyes closed. It is the silent, constant feedback loop that tells your brain where every part of your body is at any given moment. The feet are a primary source of this crucial sensory data. As you stand or walk, the nerve endings on your soles are constantly firing, sending signals to your brain about the pressure under different parts of your feet, the angle of the ground, and the texture of the surface. This information is processed in the sensory cortex, a region of the brain dedicated to interpreting bodily sensations. Remarkably, the area of the sensory cortex that processes information from the feet is roughly the same size as the area that processes information from the hands. This tells us that the brain places an extremely high value on the input it receives from its foundation. Walking in thick-soled, cushioned shoes disrupts this vital communication. The foam barrier dampens the signal, turning a rich stream of high-fidelity data into a muddled, indistinct noise. The brain, starved of clear information, has to guess. It must make decisions about balance and movement based on incomplete data. This is why walking on an uneven surface in thick-soled boots can feel surprisingly unstable. Your brain is not getting the feedback it needs to make the necessary microcorrections. This has two significant long-term implications. The first is a decline in balance. Balance is not a static trait, but a skill, a dynamic process of sensing and responding. When the sensory input from the feet is consistently dulled, the brain's ability to practice and refine this skill is compromised. Over time, the neural pathways responsible for balance can become less efficient. This is why balance tends to decline with age. But research suggests that this decline is not inevitable. By restoring clear sensory feedback to the feet, we can effectively retrain the brain, leading to significant improvements in stability. Some studies have found that walking in minimal footwear can improve balance by as much as 40% compared to walking in conventional padded shoes. For an older population, this is a profound and life-altering shift, directly impacting the risk of falls and the confidence to remain active. The second implication is more subtle, but potentially far-reaching. The brain operates on a principle of use it or lose it. Neural pathways that are frequently stimulated remain strong and vital. Those that are neglected can atrophy. When we consistently walk in shoes that dull sensory feedback, we are, in effect, asking the brain to pay less attention to the feet. The part of the brain dedicated to processing signals from the feet receives less and less input. Some researchers have proposed a link between this long-term sensory deprivation and a greater risk of cognitive decline. The theory is that a sedentary lifestyle, driven in part by discomfort and poor balance, is a known risk factor. But there may be a more direct link. A body that moves less and senses less provides less overall stimulation to the brain, contributing to a general decline in neural vitality. This is not a claim of causation, but an observation of association. A body that is richly connected to its environment, that sends a constant stream of complex data to the brain, is a body that is actively supporting its own cognitive health. Part 3. The vulnerable years. How foot health begins in childhood. If the foundation of a lifetime of healthy movement is built on the strength and sensory capability of the feet, then the quality of that foundation is largely determined in childhood. The feet we have in our 50s, 60s, and beyond are not the feet we were born with. They are the feet that have been shaped, molded, and sometimes deformed by decades of experience and by decades of footwear. The foot of a young child is a remarkable thing. It is not a miniature version of an adult foot. The bones are not yet fully formed or calcified. They are, in scientific terms, highly plastic and malleable. This is a necessary feature of development, allowing the foot to grow and adapt. But it also makes the child's foot exquisitely vulnerable to external forces. Consider the typical path of a child's footwear. For the first year or two, many babies wear soft, flexible booties or go barefoot. These are excellent for development, allowing the foot to move and sense freely. The first real shoes a child gets are often still relatively soft and flexible. But then, around the age of 4 or 5, something changes. The child is ready for their first fashionable shoes. These shoes often have a harder sole, a more structured upper, and a tapered toe box. They are designed to look cool, not to support natural development. This is the critical juncture. When a child's soft, malleable foot is placed into a rigid, non-anatomical shoe day after day, the foot begins to conform to the shape of the shoe. The toes are squeezed together, and over time, they can become permanently held in that deformed position. The muscles that would normally be used for balance and propulsion are underutilized, failing to develop their full strength. The sensory feedback loop is dampened from the very beginning, establishing a lower baseline for proprioception. What this means is that a significant portion of the population arrives at adulthood with feet that are, in a very real sense, compromised from the start. They are not as strong as they could be. They are not as sensitive as they could be. They may have already begun to develop structural deformities, like bunions, which are often incorrectly attributed to genetics but are far more likely a result of this early, sustained deformation. This sets the stage for the cascade of compensation to begin earlier and to be more profound. A weak, insensitive foot in a 20-year-old is a weak, insensitive foot that will be asked to support a body for another 60 or 70 years. The seeds of back pain in late middle age may very well have been planted when that person was 5 years old, with their first pair of rigid, fashionable sneakers. This is not meant to inspire guilt or worry, but rather to illustrate the power of environment and choice. It highlights that the principles of natural foot health are not just for those already experiencing pain, but are a fundamental aspect of lifelong development. It also points to the remarkable resilience of the human body. Even feet that have been compromised for decades can, when given the opportunity, begin to regain strength and function. Part 4. A blueprint for resilience. The principles of natural movement. The cascade of compensation. The dulling of the senses. The early deformation. These are all descriptions of how we have drifted from our natural design. But understanding the problem points directly toward the solution. The solution is not to add more technology, more support, or more cushioning. It is to subtract these things. It is to remove the obstacles that prevent the body from doing what it is designed to do. The philosophy of natural movement is built on a set of simple, elegant principles. These principles are not new, they are ancient. They are the principles that guided human movement for the vast majority of our time on this planet. They are a blueprint for resilience, a way to rebuild our foundation from the ground up. The first principle is sensory engagement. The foot needs to feel the ground. This means moving away from thick-soled shoes and toward footwear that is thin and flexible. The ideal sole is just thick enough to provide protection from sharp objects and extreme temperatures, but thin enough to allow the nerve endings on the bottom of the foot to perceive the texture and contour of the surface beneath them. This is not about being uncomfortable. It is about restoring a vital conversation between your body and the earth. When you can feel the ground, Your brain can make better decisions about balance and movement, leading to greater stability and efficiency. The second principle is anatomical freedom. The foot needs room to be a foot. This means seeking out shoes with a wide toe box that allows the toes to splay out to their natural position. The toes should not be squeezed together. There should be space for the great toe to lie straight, in alignment with the rest of the foot, so it can perform its function as a pivot and anchor. When you look at a healthy, unshod foot, you see toes that are spread apart, ready to grip and balance. This is the natural shape, and a shoe designed for natural movement should allow the foot to return to this shape over time. The third principle is dynamic function. The foot needs to be allowed to move. This means seeking out footwear that is completely flexible, with a zero-drop platform, meaning the heel is the same height as the forefoot. This allows the foot to rest in a neutral position. It allows the arch to perform its natural spring-like function, flattening to absorb shock and recoiling to propel you forward. It allows the ankle to move through its full range of motion. A shoe built on this principle is not a rigid cast. It is a flexible glove for the foot, moving with it and allowing its natural dynamism to flourish. These three principles, sensory engagement, anatomical freedom, and dynamic function, are the cornerstones of a different relationship with footwear. They are a shift away from the idea of a shoe as a device that corrects and supports, and toward the idea of a shoe as a simple, protective layer that allows the foot to be a foot. The benefits of this shift are supported by evidence. As mentioned earlier, research has demonstrated that simply walking in footwear that adheres to these principles can lead to a 60% increase in foot strength over a period of 6 months. This is not the result of a specific exercise regimen. It is simply the result of removing the cast and allowing the muscles to do the work they were designed to do. The same research and other studies have shown significant improvements in balance. These are not marginal gains. They are substantial, life-altering improvements in fundamental aspects of physical capability. They represent a powerful opportunity to reverse the effects of a lifetime of living in shoes that weaken and disable. Part 5. The transition, a path of patience and awareness. For someone who has spent a lifetime in conventional footwear, the prospect of switching to minimalist shoes can feel both exciting and a little daunting. The key to a successful transition is understanding that it is a process, not an event. It is a rehabilitation program for your feet. And like any rehabilitation program, it requires patience, awareness, and a gradual approach. Imagine, once more, the analogy of a limb in a cast. If you have worn a cast on your arm for a month or two, you know that when it comes off, the arm is not ready for heavy lifting. It has atrophied. The muscles are weak, and the coordination is off. You must give it time to recover, starting with gentle movements and gradually increasing the demand. The same is true for your feet. After decades of being held in a rigid, cushioned cast, they are likely to be weaker and less coordinated than you realize. If you switch to minimalist shoes and immediately go for a long, vigorous hike, you are asking too much, too soon. You may experience soreness in your calves or the soles of your feet. This is not a sign that the shoes are bad. It is a sign that muscles and connective tissues that have been dormant for years are suddenly being asked to work. The wise approach is to start slowly. Begin by wearing your new shoes for short periods around the house, perhaps for an hour or two each day. Go for short, gentle walks on level, forgiving surfaces like pavement or a smooth trail. Pay attention to the sensations in your feet and legs. You may notice muscles working that you never felt before. This is a good sign. As your feet begin to adapt, you can gradually increase the duration and intensity of your walks. You can start to experiment with more varied terrain. The process is highly individual. A younger, lighter, more active person may adapt in a few weeks. An older person, or someone with significant deconditioning, may need several months. The important thing is to listen to your body and let it set the pace. There is no prize for transitioning quickly. The prize is a lifetime of stronger, healthier feet. This gradual approach also helps explain why some people have had negative experiences with minimalist footwear in the past. In the enthusiasm of a barefoot revolution, many people were encouraged to make a sudden, dramatic switch. They went from highly supportive running shoes to the most minimal shoes available, often with individual toe pockets, and tried to maintain their previous level of activity. This was like taking a cast off a broken leg and immediately trying to run a marathon. The resulting injuries were not a failure of the concept of natural movement, but a failure of implementation. A successful transition is built on patience, not on revolution. Part 6. Reevaluating common problems and solutions. Adopting a new perspective on foot health also requires us to reevaluate some long-held beliefs about common foot ailments and their treatments. Two areas in particular warrant a closer, more critical look: the conventional wisdom on bunions and the widespread use of orthotics. For generations, bunions have been viewed primarily as a hereditary condition. If your mother had bunions, the thinking went, you were likely to have them, too. This explanation, while convenient, overlooks the overwhelming evidence of the role of footwear. A bunion is a deformity of the joint at the base of the great toe. It occurs when the great toe is pushed inward toward the other toes, causing the joint to protrude outward. The primary force that pushes the great toe inward is the narrow, tapered toe box of conventional shoes. This is especially pronounced in high heels, which jam the foot forward into this pointed compartment. When you consider that for most of human history, before the advent of modern, narrow shoes, bunions were exceptionally rare. The hereditary argument becomes difficult to sustain. What is likely inherited is not the bunion itself, but a foot shape, perhaps one with a slightly wider or more mobile structure, that may be more vulnerable to the deforming forces of modern footwear. The true cause is environmental. The shoe deforms the foot, not the genes. This is a powerful reframing. It means that for many people, a bunion is not an inevitable genetic destiny, but a preventable and potentially even reversible consequence of a lifetime of wearing shoes that are the wrong shape. This line of thinking also calls into question the standard treatment for many foot problems: the prescription of custom orthotics. Orthotics are shoe inserts designed to support the arch, control excessive motion, and redistribute pressure. For someone with foot pain, they can provide immediate, often dramatic, relief. This relief, however, can be deceptive. The orthotic works by doing the job that the foot's own muscles and structures have failed to do. It props up the arch, immobilizing it further. It controls motion, preventing the foot from having to control itself. In the short term, this can be a helpful strategy for managing acute pain. But as a long-term solution, it can become part of the problem. By continuing to perform the work of the foot, the orthotic ensures that the foot's own muscles never have to re-engage. They remain weak and inactive. The person becomes dependent on the orthotic, needing its support for the rest of their life. A more fundamental approach would be to ask why the foot became weak in the first place, and to create a plan for gradually strengthening it, so that it no longer needs external support. For the vast majority of people, the path to long-term foot health lies not in finding the perfect orthotic, but in weaning themselves off the need for one entirely, through a gradual process of strengthening and repatterning their movement. Part 7. The wisdom of traditional cultures and timeless practices. The principles of natural movement are not a new discovery from a modern laboratory. They are an ancient wisdom, embedded in the practices of traditional cultures around the world. Observing how people lived and moved before the advent of the modern shoe industry provides a powerful and instructive contrast. For thousands of years, humans made their own footwear from the materials at hand. In the Arctic, the Sami people crafted boots from reindeer hide, using the skin from below the animal's knee because it was naturally adapted to withstand the cold. These boots were thin, flexible, and shaped to the foot. They were, by any definition, a barefoot-style shoe, worn with a layer of dry grass for insulation. They allowed people to move through extreme cold for centuries without the knee and back pain that is now so common. In North America, indigenous peoples made moccasins from soft, tanned animal hides. These were not stiff, supportive boots. They were flexible, form-fitting coverings that allowed the foot to move naturally while protecting it from the elements. In Africa, sandals were made from animal hide or woven from plant fibers. In India and across Asia, the practice of going barefoot both inside and outside the home has been common for millennia. The Ayurvedic tradition, one of the world's oldest holistic healing systems, even prescribes walking barefoot on the earth as a way to reduce inflammation and promote a sense of well-being, a practice that aligns with modern ideas about grounding. The stories from these cultures are not just quaint historical anecdotes. They are real-world evidence of a different way of living. They demonstrate that humans are capable of moving vigorously and living long, active lives without the constant support of modern, structured shoes. They also provide cautionary tales. In the Arctic, the introduction of modern, supportive boots from the South has led to a peculiar phenomenon. The younger generation, wearing these new boots, began to experience knee and hip pain for the first time. An informal wisdom has since emerged. When your joints start to hurt, go back to wearing the traditional reindeer moccasins, and the pain will subside. This is a small-scale, real-world experiment that perfectly illustrates the central thesis of this entire discussion. The traditional way, the natural way, is not primitive. It is sophisticated in its own right, and it works. These traditions also highlight the importance of simply spending time barefoot. For many people in Western societies, shoes are worn from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed. The foot is never free. Incorporating periods of barefoot time into your daily routine is one of the simplest and most powerful things you can do for your foot health. Walking barefoot on grass, soil, or sand provides the ultimate sensory experience for the feet. It strengthens the small intrinsic muscles. It challenges your balance in a way that paved surfaces do not. And, as many people who practice it will attest, it simply feels good. It is a way of reconnecting, both physically and psychologically, with the natural world. Part 8. A unified philosophy, integrating the principles into a life of vitality. The principles of natural movement, sensory engagement, and gradual adaptation are not meant to be isolated tips. They are part of a larger, unified philosophy of health. It is a philosophy that values function over support, sensation over numbness, and resilience over dependency. Integrating these ideas into your life is not about a single purchase or a single change. It is about adopting a new lens through which to view your body and its relationship with the world. This philosophy begins with the ground, but it does not end there. When you rebuild your foundation, you create the potential for positive change throughout the entire kinetic chain. Stronger, more sensitive feet lead to better shock absorption, taking the load off your knees and hips. Better balance leads to more confident movement, encouraging you to stay active. The simple act of walking, freed from the constraints of thick, clunky shoes, can become a more pleasurable and beneficial activity. A walk is no longer just transportation or exercise. It becomes a form of sensory engagement, a way of exploring your environment with your whole body. This approach also integrates seamlessly with other pillars of healthy aging. A body that moves well is a body that is more likely to want to move. This increased activity supports metabolic health, helps maintain a healthy body composition, and promotes cardiovascular fitness. The stimulation of movement supports cognitive function. The time spent outdoors, perhaps walking barefoot on the grass, combines the benefits of natural movement with the benefits of fresh air, sunlight, and a sense of connection to the wider world. It is not a matter of doing one right thing, but of creating a virtuous cycle where each healthy choice supports and reinforces the others. Consider, for example, the practice of a simple morning routine. Stepping outside, perhaps onto a patch of grass or a garden path, and standing or walking slowly for a few minutes. Feeling the coolness of the earth under your feet, allowing your brain to register the texture, the temperature, the slight irregularities of the ground. This is not just a pleasant way to start the day. It is a form of neuromuscular training. It is a way of waking up the sensory pathways in your feet and your brain. It is a small act of self-care that has profound implications for your balance, your stability, and your overall sense of being grounded in the world. The goal is not to achieve a state of perfect, pain-free perfection. The human body, at any age, will have its quirks and limitations. The goal is to maximize your inherent capability. It is to ensure that your foundation is as strong, as resilient, and as responsive as it can possibly be. It is to move away from a mindset of managing decline and toward a mindset of cultivating vitality. The story of your body is written from the ground up. For too long, we have built our houses on a foundation that has been systematically weakened and numbed by the very things we thought were protecting it. The path to a different future, one with fewer aches, better balance, and a greater capacity for joyful movement, begins with a simple, powerful act. It begins with taking off your shoes, feeling the ground beneath you, and taking the first step toward rebuilding the architecture of your own long life. And so, we return to the question we started with. Is the gradual decline we associate with aging an unavoidable fate, or is it the consequence of a lifetime of choices that have slowly, quietly, weakened our foundation? The evidence suggests a different path is possible. The single most important takeaway is this: your body's capacity for strength, balance, and pain-free movement is not a fixed number that declines with each birthday. It is a potential that can be cultivated, restored, and maintained, and it begins by re-establishing a healthy conversation between your feet and the earth. We would love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever considered the role your footwear plays in your overall well-being? Share your reflections in the comments below. And if you found value in this discussion, we invite you to explore the other videos in our library and subscribe so you never miss a new chapter in the archive of healthy aging. This is the Longevity Library. Listen, learn, and live longer.